Chapter 9 of The Day the School Blew Up, and it is entitled A Different Kind of Trouble. Like so many times before, I found myself in Principal Purvis's office in the same hardwood chair, staring at disgruntled educators. Both Mr. Purvis and Miss Witherspoon were on the other side of the principal's desk, carefully reviewing the contest rules, frantically looking for some loophole that would eliminate me and put someone like Lucas in the contest. They had been reading for 20 minutes, while the rest of the school was finishing chapel with Pastor Joe, who was asked to tell mission stories until they came back. "Did you find anything yet?" I asked hopefully. They both looked at me expressionless. Principal Purvis spoke. "I don't know how you did it, but you have managed to get yourself into a completely different kind of trouble. How did you manage to get every question right on this test?" I didn't answer. Who would believe that I got 100% out of dumb luck? Even I couldn't believe it. I had to admit that I was a little excited, not because I would get to compete, but it was nice to have people in awe of my intelligence. However, most of me felt sick, nervous, and scared. It's one thing to fail a test in school, but if I competed, I was going to fail not only in front of my school, but every Christian school in town. I let out a sigh. Mr. Purvis did the same and sat down. "There's nothing for it, Miss Witherspoon," he groaned. "He can't get out of this." "I'm not sure what to say, sir," Miss Witherspoon said. "It would be one thing if Peter wanted to participate, but judging by the green hue he has taken on in the last few minutes, my guess is that he isn't thrilled about it either. Are you?" I shook my head. Mr. Purvis slid his chair to the water cooler and took a long drink. He crushed the paper cup and held it in his hand for a few minutes as he thought. "Peter, you have caused me enough grief this year. How I wish I could just give you detention and be done with it." He got up and looked at the calendar on the wall. "When is the contest, Miss Witherspoon?" "October 22, a month from now." "When did you say?" He suddenly seemed to have a new thought. "October 22, Sunday afternoon and evening." A weird smile spread across Principal Purvis's face. "Well, Miss Witherspoon," he began, turning around to face me, "if there is no way to prevent Peter from representing the school, then we will just have to make sure he does a good job." He chuckled to himself. Miss Witherspoon and I were too confused to speak, so Principal Purvis continued. He stood upright, hiked up his belt, and walked towards my chair, staring down at me. "Pappenfuss, are you familiar with the Great Disappointment?" I had heard something about it in Bible class and Sabbath school, but I couldn't recall just what it was at the moment. "Not really." Principal Purvis cleared his throat. "Oh, great. A lecture. Back before our church officially organized, there was a man named William Miller, who, by studying the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation, determined that Christ would come on October 22, 1844. "Was he right?" I said snidely. Principal Purvis's eyes narrowed, but I thought I saw Miss Witherspoon suppress a smile. "Obviously not," he retorted sharply, "but thousands of people believed Miller." Mr. Purvis stood up and paced towards his window, looking out on the parking lot and waxing elegant. "Miller's followers waited all that day and into the night, waiting for Christ to come. And when he didn't, there was terrible grief. So great was their grief that in our church history, that date is called the Great Disappointment, because what they had been hoping for never happened." "Bummer," I said. "Indeed," continued Mr. Purvis, turning around with the same strange smile. "But later, through Bible study and visions given to one of our church founders—" "Ellen White?" I asked, purely guessing. Mr. Purvis nodded. "The real meaning of October 22, 1844 was discovered. Despite Miller's mistake, God had led his people anyway." He laughed to himself at this point. I was starting to feel really nervous. Miss Witherspoon. He whirled to look at her, at the same time pointing at me for emphasis. How much detention has this boy received for his antics so far this year? Miss Witherspoon was standing in the corner of the room behind the principal with her arms crossed. She had been puzzling over his history lesson and shook her head to snap out of the trance. I believe 2 weeks, sir. Well, how about we make it 6 in light of this little stunt? What? I exclaimed, shooting out of my chair. You can't do that. I didn't do anything wrong. Mr. Pappenfuss! Principal Purvis shouted so loud my ears rang. You will not address me in such a matter. Do you understand? Now sit down. I stood frozen with rage, but Miss Witherspoon sprang to my side before I did anything stupid. Mr. Purvis, she exclaimed. There was an icy, awkward moment between the two teachers. I slowly sat down without breathing. After an eternity, Mr. Purvis broke the silence. My apologies, Miss Witherspoon, he said. Miss Witherspoon placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder as the principal unveiled his plan in much quieter tones. But somehow I didn't feel any better after hearing it. Peter will be given 4 more weeks of detention. However, he added quickly, before I could protest again, it will not be spent in idle waiting or loitering or even helping to clean the classroom. It will be spent in rigorous study under the tutelage of our newest teacher, Miss Mary Ann Witherspoon. Now it was Miss Witherspoon's turn to protest as I marveled at the revelation of my teacher's first name. I don't have time. I'm barely keeping up as it is, she wailed. Being new to the school and to teaching in general, I have papers to grade, bulletin boards to set up and tear down, and tutor Peter Paul Pappenfuss so he doesn't embarrass the school. Mr. Purvis straightened his tie and stepped very close to Miss Witherspoon. Don't forget, my dear, that this contest was your idea in the first place. I went to bat for you at the school board meeting. I even signed that letter asking the contest committee to hold the competition on Sunday evening so our school could participate. And now you have the audacity to forsake the pupil who has placed himself in the contest on your behalf? Miss Witherspoon swallowed hard, realizing there was no way out. No, sir, I won't forsake him. I'll do as you wish. Principal Purvis smiled a smile that made neither of us feel happy. Excellent. I'll call Pastor Pappenfuss and his wife to let them know the good news. To my dismay, my parents did think it was good news. They were elated, and when they found out that the contest prize was 10,000 big ones, I could hear my dad shout, "Woohoo!" on the line, even across Principal Purvis's desk. After hanging up the phone, he told me my mother had said she would do anything to support my tutoring sessions, which in my opinion were worse than detention. After that, Mr. Purvis dismissed Miss Witherspoon and me, but not before placing a hand on my shoulder and giving it an uncomfortable squeeze, saying, "Let's hope that God will bless. And you know that the 22nd was really the great anticipation, and it was the following day that was the real disappointment. Let's hope the anticipation of this year's October 22 won't end in a great disappointment." He walked us out of his office and sent us back to chapel, where Pastor Joe was running out of stories to tell. Then he shut his office door. "Come on, Peter, let's go," said Mary Ann Witherspoon as we walked, not saying a thing, back to chapel and the rest of the school day. At the end of the day, an announcement was made over the intercom confirming that the entire student body that the school's reputation rested on my shoulders. My stomach bubbled and made noises when I heard it. Most people thought it was kind of funny. A few, like Harley and Gretchen, actually wished me well. "You can do it, Pete," said Harley. "If you can guess a perfect score, just think what will happen when you study. You could be more than perfect." The only naysayer was Lucas, who approached me as I was putting my things away just before the bell rang. "I heard that you will be competing on the day of the great disappointment. How fitting. Try not to hurt yourself studying. Don't want to burn out both your brain cells." Before I could pummel him, the bell rang and he pranced away, laughing down the hall. Meanwhile, I was stuck at school for the next hour. Peter! It was Miss Witherspoon. She made her way through the stream of kids leaving to go home. Are you okay? I wasn't sure how to respond. I rarely took Lucas seriously, but I did feel ill. She motioned for me to sit down at my desk and took the desk next to me. This isn't what you thought or wanted to happen, is it? I shook my head. She smiled. Me either. I know you must feel a lot of pressure, and I do too. This is my first classroom, and I want to make a good impression. I thought this contest would be something simple, but it has gotten to be difficult. I also know that there are some people in the school that thrive on making life difficult for others. I wondered if she meant Lucas or Principal Purvis. In any case, she continued, we have to work together, and we need to make the best of things. I promise I will try to make this fun and try to be as energetic and helpful so the time passes quickly. But you'll have to help me, okay? And maybe sometimes I'll bring some snacks and we can go outside and get some exercise. After all, physical education is still education, right? She smiled warmly at me, and I felt a little bit better. Thanks, Miss Witherspoon. You're welcome, Peter. Miss Witherspoon? Yes? Could we start with physical education today? She laughed. A genuine laugh. Not one of those fake ones adults sometimes use when they want to make you think your jokes are funny. I think we can do that, Peter. I could use some fresh air. Would you like to take a walk? I nodded. As we put our coats on, I asked Miss Witherspoon if she thought I stood a chance. Do I think you have more than 2 brain cells? I felt my mouth smile, even though I didn't want it to. Peter, I think you're as smart as anyone else your age. You just have to learn to apply those smarts to something other than mischief. And yes, I think you stand a chance at winning as well, if you're willing to work. I hate work, but I hate the thought of looking stupid and proving Lucas right even more. So for now, I'm at the mercy of God and my teacher.